Hello friends and neighbors, it's November 10th. I just passed 24,000 words in my NaNoWriMo novel, and I'm taking another break to give you a book review. Because yesterday afternoon I finished reading Maureen Johnson's newest book, The Name of the Star. Now normally I like to wait a little bit longer than a day just to think through what I'm going to say in the review and what I really think of the book, but I kind of wanted to get this review out right away. So here it is. Before I started reading The Name of the Star, I had read 4 other books by Maureen Johnson. And I was evenly split in what I thought of them. 2 of the books are on my favorites list, and actually one of them is on my ultimate recommendation list, and the other 2 books were just okay. So I wasn't entirely sure what I was going to think of this newest book, particularly knowing that it was classified as a supernatural thriller, and the one book of Maureen Johnson's that I'd read that had supernatural elements in it, I wasn't as crazy about. This book, however, did not disappoint me. It belongs squarely in the favorites column of Maureen Johnson novels. It is an absolutely wonderful story. The story revolves around an American girl named Rory who is going to a British boarding school called Wexford. And while she is doing this and making all the awkward transitions that you would expect both from the situation and from a Maureen Johnson novel, there have been a string of murders happening around London. Not only that, but the murders are strongly reminiscent, in fact almost identical to, the murders of Jack the Ripper from the late 19th century. Jack the Ripper, of course, is a famous name in London. He was a serial killer back in the late 19th century, back when the police force was just getting started, and he was never caught, and people still talk about him, they still give tours. There are actually people who specialize in Ripper mythology. And so this new string of Ripper-like murders, of course, has London all in a tizzy. Now that's the premise of the novel. To tell you much more would be giving away certain plot elements that I really don't want to give away, so I'm gonna leave it at that. But suffice it to say, this book is very, very well written. One of my problems with Devilish, the other Maureen Johnson novel that has supernatural elements in it, is that the pacing just seemed off. It seemed to move a little bit too quickly, and there wasn't a lot of time to really get to know the characters and build up a lot of atmosphere and tension. But with this book, the pacing is just spot on. There's a lot of atmosphere, a lot of tension, and you really do get to know the characters. It's really, really well crafted. The book actually seems to go through a number of different genres as you move through the story. When it first starts out, it just seems like a very typical Maureen Johnson novel about this young girl making the transition and being awkward and all the sort of things that you expect from a Maureen Johnson novel. But it transitions from awkward teenage comedy slash romance slash drama to a thriller, to a ghost story, to an action adventure fantasy thing. To the point that by the time you get to the end of the novel, it really doesn't even feel like the same book. It feels like you've transitioned into a different story than the one that you started out in. But it's done so gradually and so well that you aren't even aware that it's happening until you get to that point and you think back to the beginning of the novel and think, huh, I had no idea that it was going to end up like this. And it echoes Rory's transition from being worried about fitting in and transitioning and not committing British faux pas and all that sort of thing, to being worried about the other things that she's worried about at the end of the novel that I'm not going to tell you because that would give things away. This book was really, really enjoyable to read. I had a hard time putting it down, but at the same time it didn't feel rushed, it didn't feel like it was over too soon, it felt like the appropriate length for this story. And it is the first part of a series, and I know some of you might be worried about it ending in a cliffhanger and leaving you hanging until the next part of the series comes out, but it really doesn't do that. I mean, there are unresolved issues at the end, and there are questions at the end that tell you that there, yes, is going to be another book in this series, but at the same time, the story itself, the bulk of the story, is pretty self-contained. There's an overarching conflict that we're going to see once we get to the other books of the series, but the main conflict of this book is resolved. So I feel satisfied at the ending of this book, but at the same time, I am really looking forward to the next book in the series so I can continue to follow these characters in this story. So again, an excellent novel, really well told, really well crafted, possibly one of her best works yet. On the worth meter, I would definitely give this a worth owning new. So go find it, go read it, go enjoy it. You won't be disappointed. And on that note, back to work. Hello friends and neighbors, it's November... I still haven't changed my calendar. 9th? 10th? It's a day in November.